In 1984, Namco publishes an action RPG called the Tower of Druaga, where a golden armored knight named Gilgamesh must climb 60 floors of a maze and rescue the maiden Kai from the demon Druaga. This was the start of a minor Namco series, Babylon Castle Saga. In the following years, Namco would publish a sequel, The Return of Ishtar, in 1986, and then a prequel, The Quest of Kai, in 1988. The influence of Dungeons & Dragons, as well as Mesopotamian, Sumerian, and Babylonian myth are blatantly apparent to anyone familiar with them. But in 2006, Gonzo was hired to produce the next part in the story of the Tower of Druaga, the Aegis of Uruk. It's been decades since Gilgamesh first climbed the tower and came down a king, and as he in his twilight years sits on the throne of Babylon, warriors, rogues, and mages from all around the world flock to the tower to scale its floors, vanquish its monsters inside, and gather treasures from within its floors. These hopefuls being called climbers. While most are in it for the promises of riches, our protagonist Jill is in it for a different reason. He grew up on legends of the hero Gilgamesh, so when he arrived at the tower he had one goal: the very top. Jill joins the party of his brother Neba, but after his first foray leaves him unconscious and getting carried back down, Neba's party agrees Jill isn't fit to climb the tower and kicks him out. Now Jill has to find another way up the tower, and ends up forming a new party with Kaya, a sort of enigmatic priestess, who definitely knows more than she lets on, and Ame, a taciturn spearwoman, and recruiting Melt, a high-on-his-own-fumes mage, and Koopa, his one-caddy, menial servant, and keeper. And in 2009, the series would get a second season, The Sword of Uruk, which sees Kaya replaced with Kai, an equally enigmatic priestess, who also knows more than she's letting on, as well as two members of Neba's party, Fatina, a fire mage with romance issues to work out, and Utu, a heavily armed axeman, where the joke is you usually never see his face. Does this series sound familiar? You could consider it something of a predecessor to Danmachi. Not exactly, but close. This series actually predates Danmachi by at least 4 years, since the light novel and manga wouldn't be published until 2013, and their anime wouldn't start until 2015. But that's no reason not to watch it. The Tower of Druaga knows what it is and leans into it with obvious references to its original arcade game. And even though it's a high fantasy that breaks the fourth wall with comedy, it never does so with its characters. In every sense of the work, the cast of characters are trying to live their best lives in this absolute insanity that is the Tower of Druaga. But little do the characters, or we who are watching the show, know that the tower has more than one secret that will turn everything we know about this world on its head. The story is a tangled mess of narratives that only start to semi-sort itself out in the second season. The entire first season is just the characters being and doing what they do, but the big turning point is when Druaga is finally slain, only for a betrayal on both sides to show itself. And it both helps and hurts the series that the second season takes a very stark tone compared to the first. While the first season is primarily a lighthearted fantasy comedy, it ramps up the serious fucking business tone just past halfway through, and the final of season 1 almost seems like a completely different series. When season 2 starts, you get a bit of that leftover comedy for a few episodes, but it gets into the serious business much sooner, which kind of makes sense as the major story event happens at the end of the 10th episode of season 2. This series came out when I was just barely out of my teens, and I'd not seen anything in Western media pull something like this, so the plot twist of the real purpose of the tower blew my mind, because it was such a stark and sudden shift to the entire story of the series up to that point. Like the big reveal puts new context into everything you learn about the characters of the show. Normally, I would say spoilers are a you problem, because if knowing something ahead of time ruins the experience for you, that's on you, not on people who actually like and talk about the thing. This is one of those very rare instances where I actually do think that knowing ahead of time alters the context of how everything is playing out through the entire series, in a way that just knowing it ruins what you could be experiencing by not knowing it beforehand. It's that important of a piece of the puzzle to the story. But that's not to say the rest of the side plots and side characters don't have good writing. They do. Even with the comedy in the first season. I wouldn't call it amazing, but I would call it better than most. Also, for the purpose of the story, episode 1 has 2 versions. The version listed as episode 1 of the series takes place in Jill's dream after he's knocked out in his first fight. The alternate episode 1 is what's actually happening in regards to all of the other characters who would be part of the story while Jill is sleeping. And that's kind of one of the cool things about having these 2 episodes. You can watch one, you can watch both, it doesn't really matter. Neither is so pivotal to the plot that you have to see it, but both are equally valuable and can take the place of episode 1. One of the things that sticks out is you can tell Gonzo had a lot of fun making at least the first season, as the first season really does lean into the origins of the game being an arcade cabinet. Like in episode 5 with Ziozustra's Trap. The place is littered with these little magic crystal glass thingies that if you break them, strange things happen.
Babe now?
Yes, that's exactly what I think.
I've got huge boobs. They're enormous.
Or episode 8, The Legendary Tower, where Kaya is very clearly lying and everybody but Jill knows she's lying, but he still buys it and decides to help her as she puts him into quite literally the Tower of Druaga arcade game that she plays to completion. The series even got an English dub, so you don't have to watch it with subtitles. Of course, this was back before the English VA cult went entirely insane, but if I started mentioning names, it would probably sour the experience for quite a few people. And compound that with a wild mix of conflicting personalities to keep up the tension. Jill is child-minded with ambitions of grandeur and heroism. Kaya comes off as a genuinely gentle person. Ame is an enigma because she just doesn't talk all that much. At least until the second season. And we can only assume her motivations are wealth since she doesn't really expand upon why she's a climber. Neba constantly says how much he wants to reach the top of the tower, but never why. Fatina is your swooning maiden, following Neba in hopes of gaining his affections. Utu is, well, just a bro. And while he's also somewhat enigmatic, he talks a lot more than Ame. Melt is your high and mighty nobleman, fallen on hard times, explains literally everything about the way he acts. And Koopa proves that not only is she the most capable member of the party, but she's also still a brat. The amount of character packed into 24 episodes of an original story, no manga or light novel to fall back on. It's honestly impressive. The references and fourth wall breaks that the characters don't react to at all are a delight. Using the classic console and arcade games for the world building keeps the setting both separate but familiar. It really gives the nostalgic feeling of the early years of the internet and the rise of referential humor, which is a weird feeling coming from an anime. But I don't hate it. Even the openings do this pseudo fourth wall break by putting the characters in the modern world to show what it might be like if the Tower of Druaga was just an MMO they were playing, and had normal lives outside of it. Kind of like Dot Hack Sign, or Sword Art Online without the you die in the game, you die in real life cliché. Let's be honest here. Sword Art Online fell off hard after Season 1, and should have ended after Season 2. Log Horizon just does the trapped in a video game shtick better, both of which came out long after Tower of Druaga aired. And I will admit my bias for this series. Not for anything in particular within the show itself, but when it came out I was a younger, dumber, and happier person. As I've aged and wizened up, I now look back at the time when this show was new. I bought the box set, I still have the DVDs. I and my weeb friends would have IRL watch parties for these kinds of shows. And it wasn't always just watch parties. We'd throw on anime and we'd pull out our cards and we'd be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic, or talking about the next convention we're going to. This series just has some very fond memories attached to it for me. And even without that, it's still a good watch. I am the NBT. This has been the Noble Weeaboo. If you haven't seen this series, I highly recommend moving it towards the top of your watch list. It's a grand adventure, and it's one you'll remember.